Okay, folks, it's time to take a look at the ISOM number 2 campaign and ask ourselves what went wrong. Now, it's not really a question of what went wrong with the campaign. I mean, $2.35 million is still a respectable amount, as is 20,000 purchasers. But why was I so freaking off in my own prediction? See, if we look back at the ISOM number 1 actual numbers, what we had was 43,000 total purchasers and total sales amounting to $3.74 million. Now, based on these numbers in part, I was able to come up with a prediction for the ISOM number 2 campaign, and my prediction went something like this: 43,000 total purchasers. That's right, I was predicting a drop off of 0% and total sales drop of only 15%. Now, how in the world did I get to those numbers? Why is it that I had no drop in purchasers specifically? Well, the readers were told from the outset that ISOM number 1 is part 1 of a multi-part story. When you're being offered part 1, you know there's a part 2 coming, so why would you drop with part 1? I mean, it's like you're already being asked up front to buy more than one copy. If you are going to commit to spending $50 on number 1, I'm thinking you're going to be committing to spending the rest of your money. So what reader, I have to ask, what reader drops $50 on a book that's part 1 of a story unless he or she fully intends to finish it? And that $50 is the $35 for the actual issue plus tax and shipping. That's a lot of money. You know, you would think that the sunk cost fallacy alone would be dragging people along for the ride in buying ISOM number 2. Now, ISOM number 1 wasn't a perfect book by any means, but for readers who were already out $50, it was good enough. I mean, buying ISOM number 2 should feel like another justified $50 purchase, especially since number 2 is supposed to shed light on some of the mysteries of ISOM's past. I mean, it wasn't a perfect book, but I can't say that it wasn't a good enough book that those who bought it already wouldn't buy the next issue. And then I really thought that whatever small number of readers did drop would be replaced by new readers who were interested in seeing what all the hype was about. Now, how did I come to a number like 3.2 million in sales? Well, let me do the math here. ISOM number 1 originally made 3.7 million on 43,000 purchasers during the course of its original campaign. However, by the end of 2022, ISOM number 1 had made $3.8 million on 51,000 purchasers. So that was an additional 8,000 purchasers. I went ahead and used those numbers instead, figuring that, okay, that's a more accurate figure of how many people have actually bought into ISOM number 1. Now, if I assume that each purchaser bought at least one copy of ISOM number 1, then you get 51,000 purchasers times $50 per, because we're doing gross revenue, not net revenue. And that equals 2.55 million on reading copies of ISOM number 1. This is for the people these are the copies of ISOM number 1 that people actually bought to read. Now, the remaining 1.25 million that makes up that 3.8 million would have been extra copies of ISOM number 1 plus merchandise. And so I kind of thought that with the merchandise, there was already some downplaying of the merchandise for ISOM number 2. So I figured that if we just assume that half the amount of extras and merchandise would be sold during the campaign, then 50% of that 1.25 million equals 0.63 million. And if you add that back to the copy for the reading copy, or back to the figure for the reading copies, which wouldn't change from campaign to campaign, then you get 3.18 million, which is roughly 3.2 million. So that is how I got my number. Now, I am embarrassed to say that I didn't realize how big a mistake this part was. Why on earth would I have expected people who didn't buy ISOM number 1 during its original campaign to then buy ISOM number 2 during its original campaign? I should have at least theorized that people would behave the same way, and so I only really should have counted the 43,000 purchasers and the 3.7 million that had been made before. And now that I see the light, and if I go back and I plug in the numbers, which I won't belabor the point, what I come up with is a closer estimate of 2.93 million. Now, that's still not a good estimate, though, because what happened with the actual numbers? My prediction, even though I now, with these numbers, I now predicted or kind of retroactively predict that there would be a 22% drop off in sales as well as a 0% drop off in purchasers. The reality is starkly different. You had a 53% drop in total purchasers for ISOM number two and a 37% drop in total sales for ISOM number two. Those are way, way off of my prediction numbers, especially the purchasers. So I have to go back now and I have to go look at my four basic assumptions and say, is there any kind of common theme among the assumptions that I just was blind to? Because obviously there's got to be something that explains why so many people dropped off. And I think the one common theme that runs through all of my assumptions is this word reader or readers. I'm assuming that everybody who's buying ISOM is buying to read it. But there are other kinds of people besides just readers who are going to buy a comic book. Like, for example, you've got speculators. Hey, ISOM number one, hot new number one issue, brand new company, first offering. I can buy it now and I can sell it either now or later and I can get a profit off of this. Speculators are going to make up a portion of that original campaign readership, quote unquote. Noobs. You've got fans of Eric July who've never read a comic book before in their lives, or it's been like decades since the last time they did, and they don't even know if they like reading comics or reading comics anymore. And I think the spoiler is that they don't. And I know it's hard to fathom, but there actually are people who don't like comic books in general. And so even though they wanted to get on board and help Eric with his campaign, it just wasn't their cup of tea because comic books themselves, it wasn't their cup of tea. Now, there's also the ballers. These people have no real interest in the actual product. They just want to make a show of dropping money on the table. This is kind of reminiscent of the people who walk in on Eric's live streams and they drop $100 and then they walk right out and they don't even leave a super chat. This is. I'm a little bit less confident about this category because I think this category would have more likely transferred over to ISOM number two if these people were really intent on it. But then again, the novelty of dropping money on a comic book campaign might have worn off after the first time. And then last but not least, there are the habitual backers. These are people who are already used to dropping large amounts of money on purchasing independent comics and, being disappointed a good deal of the time. One more roll of the dice? These are people who are used to dropping 20, 30, 40, even $50 on a comic book or a set of comic books and being disappointed by it. So, what makes ISOM any different from any of those? You're just these people are just basically throwing their money away, and they're used to throwing their money away. So I do still feel like trying to explain with those four categories the 53% drop might be stretching things a little bit too far. And I wonder if the real thing here is that I need to go back and re-examine my original beliefs about this campaign and see if maybe I was off on any of those on a fundamental level. Like, for example, am I just wrong about the fact that there are people who are perfectly willing to go in and drop $50 on part one of a series without any intention necessarily of finishing the series? It's hard for me to fathom that $50 is a lot of money. I see a $6, $7 comic off the rack. You buy that, you get disappointed in it. Okay, fine. $6 or $7 isn't going to kill you, but $50, that's a meal out. That's dinner. That's a half a week's worth of groceries, maybe. I don't know. I mean, that just seems like a lot of money to spend on a try. But maybe there are people who are willing to do that. Was I wrong about ISOM number one being good enough? I mean, did I overestimate its quality? I mean, I know I did like 13 different videos on it, criticizing various aspects of it, but I still felt it came in above that good enough mark such that you would not see a significant drop off among the readership. I'm just really startled to see a more than 50% loss of readers. And then last but not least, the new readers idea, the idea that the small number of readers that do drop off would be replaced by new readers. I did kind of address this a little bit in one of my earlier videos where I talked about the lackluster campaign page for ISOM number two. I mean, ISOM number two was really, really trying very little to sell ISOM number two to new readers. I mean, ISOM number two's campaign page was almost cut and dried made for people who had already bought ISOM number one. And I just, you really want to try and pick up new readers with every book. You got to give people a little more than just showing them, oh, look, we got a hot black woman on the cover, and that should be good enough for you. Or, Ethan Van Sciver art, or Shane Davis. Look at ISOM Punch a Wall. These are not things that are necessarily going to attract new readers. You have to attract new readers by building on the story that you had from issue two, so that when somebody comes along saying, "Oh yeah, this is that comic that I wanted to buy, but number one just didn't sound interesting enough to me." And then you go and you read the campaign page for issue two, and it's the same information as for issue one. I mean, it's almost like he wasn't trying to sell the book to anybody new. And that to me is some amount of disappointment. I kind of blame just whoever it was that organized that campaign page for that. So maybe this is another factor. I just really don't know. So as far as what went wrong, I mean, as far as the company goes, the company's going to survive. I mean, even a 50% drop off in readership, what that really means is that now the expectations can be properly calibrated to the number of people who actually do want to hang with Rippaverse and find out going forward what the comic book universe is going to be like. How are the things, the plot points going to develop? So this 20,000 number is really much more accurate in terms of the real core base of Rippaverse fans. And hopefully Eric July will be able to take this information into account and be able to predict how his books ought to do in the future with that. So I was basically wrong. I predicted 3.2 million, and it came out to be 2.35 million. And I want to give a congratulations to anybody who actually came up with the right numbers. I know Puma Fist has been crowing about how he predicted it accurately. Now I don't know when he made his prediction or based on what, but at the same time, if he did manage to come by it honestly, then kudos to him. So congratulations to everybody who made an accurate prediction, except for this douchebag. Anime Gematria. And if you've ever seen this site, be prepared to roll your eyes so hard you're going to need an ophthalmologist later. This guy came back to me when the campaign was ending and said, "Still think numerology is a joke?" I predicted over a month ago that ISOM number two would only make either 2.3 million or 2.5 million using numerology. And I was leaning more heavily on 2.3 million since this is the year 2023. Yeah, I really couldn't believe it when this guy who I had just dismissed as a crackpot came back to me and said, "See, I was right. I was totally right all along." Now, to be fair, though, I don't really know that much about numerology or gematria or any of these kinds of things that go into, shuffling numbers around and trying to make them make sense of the world. So I did pose a challenge to him, figuring that if he comes through on the challenge, well, what the heck, I'll give his channel a shout out. So I said, I tell you what, if you haven't already done it, in which case send me your links, put up videos of your predictions for Alpha Core number one and Yaira number one's final numbers, at least one day before each campaign starts. And if you hit the trifecta, I'll dedicate a video to giving your channel a shout out. Fair enough? Yeah, what do you think are the odds that this guy actually took me up on this offer? It's zero. It turned me flat down. Why is that? Because I put this condition on it. I wanted to get those predictions at least one day prior to each campaign start. Because if you go back and you look at what it is that he published as a prediction, then you've got this clip from his video doing the predicting, saying that, hey, look, the ISOM number two pre-order campaign is in session, and based solely on the start date of June 12th, 2023, you see that you've got 23 and 25 in the various kinds of numbers that can be used to make up the date June 12th, 2023. So basically, he took 23 and 25 and said, okay, it's going to be between there. So what would be the problem then? I mean, so long as we knew what the campaign start date for the Alpha Core number one campaign and the Yaira number one campaign were going to be, and one day before each campaign starts, I mean, you definitely know by that point when the campaign's going to start. why not put together a predictive video saying here is how much that I am, just based on the start date, here is how much I am predicting that Alpha Core number one and Yaira number one are each respectively going to make. Why not? Well, there is a reason, and the reason is that this start date is actually not the only piece of input that goes into this gematria crap. The other piece of input is how far the campaign was along at the time this prediction was made. You'll notice that the total sales is not zero, which means that this June 12th based prediction was not made before June 12th. This June 12th prediction was actually made on July 4th, when the campaign was already almost a month underway and still had about a month left to go. So you've got these figures here. The current figure saying 1.7 million is where we are now. And based on that, and based on the momentum that the campaign still had, choosing these 23 and 25 numbers off of the row to the left, or the column to the left, was kind of a no-brainer to do. You're just basically taking numbers, cherry-picking numbers that are going to make sense with regard to where things are at the present time, and go with those. Now I ask you, let's say that instead of July 4th, these numbers were taken around August 20th, and the campaign was stuck at around 1.7 million on August 20th, so only a week left to go. Well, in that case, why wouldn't he have just picked the numbers 16 and 18 instead of 23 and 25? There's really literally no reason not to pick whatever the numbers that you think are going to make the most sense are. So the idea that this has actually got any kind of predictive power apart from the record of how the campaign is doing so far is just ridiculous. And there's no reason to believe in any of it. Now, Anime Dramatria doubles down, however, and says that, oh, wait, no, we can actually break this down even more granular, because if you look at the numerical breakdowns of the start date of the campaign, which is in the left-hand column, and if you look at the numbers that are produced by the end date of the campaign, which is in the right-hand column, then we can actually see how a couple of these numbers have hit on more granular, more specific totals to prove out the merits of this gematria crap. Well, here's the problem, though. I mean, like right now, we've got 23 and 52 highlighted, because if you look at the final total sales, then if you round up from the 1500 into 2000, you get 23 and 52. And yeah, that looks impressive. It also looks impressive when you see that 672 down there and realize that the sales goal was 672% of the original sales goal. So the total sales wound up being 6.72 times what was originally predicted, although that number was also kind of pulled out of a hat. Now, here's the problem. There are 23 more numbers on that page that have not a fucking thing to do with any of the predictions made. These are 23 worthless numbers. So basically what we're hearing is that, look, on a page of 26 numbers, I found 3 numbers that look really, really suspiciously like they have actually some kind of predictive power toward the end of the campaign. But you've also got 23 numbers that have nothing to do with the end of the campaign. Yeah, this is garbage. And the reason why it seems impressive to us is because we think that coincidences occur way less frequently than they do. We see those numbers and we see how they line up with the numbers produced by the campaign, and we think, oh, this can't be a coincidence. But coincidences occur like all the freaking time. And the best example of that is the birthday problem. Like if you take a certain number of people, excuse me, and excuse me, been a little bit under the weather lately. Okay, hopefully that's the remainder of the phlegm. If you take the number of people at a party and you generate the probability that that 2 of them will have the same birthday, well, you look at that and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, well, the 2 people at the same party, I mean, there's 365 days in the year to choose from. That's got to be a hellishly small number. You can't possibly, especially if you have, even if you have a larger number of people. So what if we took, there were 26 numbers on that page that we just looked at. What if we took 26 people? What is the probability that two of them have the same birthday? So these are the 20, taking these as being an example. What is that probability? It's close to 60%. There is a 6 out of 10 chance that you are going to have two people in that room that have the same birthday. And so when you're looking at these kinds of coincidences that occur, your brain is primed to think that these are rarities, but they're really not. If you generate any kind of set of numbers and then you compare it against some sort of analysis of events, almost always you're going to find some really, really weird kind of coincidences going on. That's why they have things like the Bible codes, where you have things like the ship that went down beneath the waves crosses over in the King James Bible with the word Titanic. It's complete coincidence. But at the same time, it makes our brains just go into this lock, thinking there can't possibly be a coincidence for this. This must be something to do with God or divinity or gematria and all this kind of moronic stuff. So yeah, when you look at these figures and you see how the numbers that were actually arrived at were just cherry picked from a random list, there's just no reason to give this kind of goofball stuff any kind of credit whatsoever, because hey, look at what was available if the campaign made between 4 and $5 million. Well, then you could have just gone and said, oh yeah, my prediction is between 4.1 and 5.2 million, and there you go. Now you've come up with a new set of numbers from the same batch that are basically cherry picked to suit wherever the campaign was at the time. If the campaign was going on $5.5 million, well, look, can't you see how the gematria was putting it between 5.2 million and 6.1 million the whole time? Yeah, this is all a bunch of BS. And so that's why when I first encountered Anime Gematria online, I said, this is a parody site, right? And someone else came along and said, one would hope it's a parody site. Otherwise, it's extreme mental illness. It's hilarious how you can cherry pick and make it come out to numbers that support any narrative you want. And that's absolutely true. This is just a matter of generating a list of numbers and then picking out the ones that look the closest and going with those and calling it a prediction. It's bogus. So, I still hold this challenge open. If Anime Gematria wants to take me up on it and make predictive videos prior to the start of each campaign, hey, go for it. Because, if you can go 3 for 3 on these, that might actually say something. Just remember to show your work and try not to make it too much like a cherry pick job. So thanks to everyone who watched this video. I hope it was informative and enlightening, and that it'll steer you away from psychic fairs and all the other crap that goes along with numerology and other astrology and all the other bogus type quote-unquote sciences. I hope that you will subscribe and follow my channel so that future updates, especially updates involving ISOM number 2, which I hear will be coming to my online retailer in the near future so that I can finally pick up some copies. Please do subscribe so that you can get informed on those and get an idea of my opinion on whether ISOM number 2 is an improvement over number 1, more of the same, or even a slide downward. I'm hoping, based on all the positive reviews that Eric has been publishing on Twitter, that this is a good book, but I'm just going to have to make that judgment for myself whenever the copies finally hit my desk. So thank you all for joining me. I'm Mike Partika. Please do subscribe, and I will talk to you later.